chapter 5 of Political Treatise by Baruch Spinoza. In this chapter, he talks about the best state of a dominion, like what makes a commonwealth. What can we look for in a commonwealth we consider to be best? You can call it near perfect or ideal. Let's use the word ideal. So he says, he starts off by saying a commonwealth is most powerful and most independent when it's founded and guided by reason. So that's the first thing he says that kind of a commonwealth needs to have. It has to be founded and guided by reason. If it's not founded and guided by reason, then it starts being like it's probably not going to be the best. It's going to have issues. And then he talks about the quality of a state of any dominion is easily perceived from the end of the civil state, which end is nothing else but peace and security of life. So you have to ask yourself, what is the end game of a state or a dominion or a commonwealth? What is the final product of it? What is the goal really? So he says the goal, of course, is peace and security. So then you ask yourself, is anything else happening within the commonwealth fostering peace and security of life? If not, then it's not going into the right direction. If it's every step it takes, is a step that is meant to foster peace and security of life, then it's heading towards the direction of being the best dominion. And therefore, that dominion is the best where men pass their lives in unity and the laws are kept unbroken. Now, there's something he says that I took a moment to think about. He says that men are not born fit for citizenship, but must be made so. And he talks about this while talking about, let me read, he says, for it's certain that seditions and wars and contempt or breach of the laws are not so much to be imputed to the wickedness of the subjects, and so and to the bad state of the dominion. So he says, crime, let me use crime just to put together all this. Crime, when crime happens in a commonwealth, it's not really about the quality of the citizens. It's not high crime is not caused by the quality of the citizens. That's how I understood his argument. It's more about the quality of the laws put in place and the structures and how everything is done. So if the laws are not maintained well and enforced well, and every structure put in place is thought about carefully, then there is going to be crime. It doesn't matter what type of population you have. And that's where he says, for men are not born fit for citizenship, but must be made for. Like, human beings are not decent by default. We are not good, like we are not peaceful by default. We are not good to our neighbor by default. It's not in our nature. These are things that we either learn or we are forced to do because we have to live within a system. Otherwise, if you leave people to live without systems in place, people are going to steal from one another, people are going to kill one another, people are going to do very terrible things to others. That's what he says. So he says people have to be made to be citizens. And that's why he says crime and chaos is a product of poor systems in place. It's not a product of the character or type of people you are dealing with. Any kind of people, if you put them in a terrible system, they are going to be terrible people. You take any kind of people and put them into a good system, they become good people. I don't think everybody can agree with that argument, but it's an argument that he makes. Personally, I think that could be just one factor that could easily make crime to be high in one country, for example, and low in another country. I think that could be just one factor. I will admit that's a very powerful factor, that if in one country laws are not enacted that are efficient, and then they are not implemented in an efficient way, of course you are going to see rising crime. But that is likely not the only factor. That, of course, there are other things, economy and whatever. But of course you can also argue that when the laws are put in place in the right way, even the economy tends to work better, and maybe then people are not in a situation where they can hurt one another. He continues to say, besides, men's natural passions are everywhere the same, and if wickedness more prevails and more offenses are committed in one commonwealth than another, it is certain that the former has not enough pursued the end of unity, nor framed its laws with sufficient forethought, and that therefore it has failed in making quite good its right as commonwealth. Yes, the argument I've just explained, that if you are looking at two countries, for example. He uses the word Commonwealth. And you see one has more crime than another, then the one with high crime is that they've not organized themselves as a Commonwealth, especially in regard to laws and how they are enacted and implemented, and yeah, things like that. And then he talks about managing the masses. He talks about there are states that will use fear, too much of it. Of course, his argument is a little bit of fear and reference when you put them together is the ideal way to run a state. But when now you use more fear and there is no reference, then or they don't, the masses don't revere the supreme authorities. Now we have an issue. He says, of Commonwealth whose subjects are but hindered by terror from taking arms, it should be said that it is not free from war, that it has peace. For peace is not mere absence of war, but is a virtue that springs from force of character. For obedience is the constant will to execute what by the general decree of the Commonwealth ought to be done. I don't know whether this is where the line that peace is like the line that people use that, let me read again. It is free, that peace has, that it has peace. Like absence of war does not translate directly to peace. I've heard people use that, call it line a lot. I didn't know where it came from. I don't know whether this is where it originally came from, that when there is no war, it doesn't mean there is peace. There can be like there is no war, but there is a lot of strife that is silent. That's what basically he's saying. And he says, besides that, Commonwealth whose peace depends on the sluggishness of its citizens that are led about like sheep to learn, but slavery may more properly be called desert than a Commonwealth. So a Commonwealth is not it's not best when the people are kind of like made to do things by force or through fear. It's not peaceful just because there's no war. His argument, in fact, when you read the entire of the chapter, is that people have to be kind of like self-driven and like being in this Commonwealth and like doing whatever the law asks them to do, or at least understand why they need to follow those laws even when they don't really like it, and to appreciate that if they don't, then there's a problem for everyone. But if it's just fear alone, then that's not a Commonwealth that is going to the best, to becoming an ideal Commonwealth. So the argument in that chapter is trying to tell us the things we need to look out for in a Commonwealth that is ideal. And the ideal here, he talks about the end game should be peace and security. When it's not peace and security, then it's likely not ideal.